Hello, my dears. It's Granny Maria here, and I'll never forget the weight in my chest the day my son turned his eyes cold and said, "It's your responsibility, not ours. Pay her debt." I was standing in my kitchen peeling carrots for soup. The knife slipped slightly in my hand, but I didn't bleed. I just looked up at him, this man I had raised with lullabies and scraped knees, and I saw nothing I recognized in his face. He didn't ask. He demanded, as if love came with a ledger. And that was the moment I knew. I had to vanish. It had started with a phone call, like most bad news does. "Mom," he said, a little too formal already, "we need to talk about something serious." I thought maybe they were expecting a baby, or moving again. But no, it was Anna, his wife, a woman I'd tried so hard to love, who had buried them in $300,000 of debt. Credit cards, failed business ventures, luxury nonsense. And now they wanted me, retired, widowed, living off careful savings, to wipe it all away. As if I were a bank, as if I owed them more than I'd already given. "You always say family means everything," he said. "Well, prove it." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or plead or reason. I just turned, walked to the drawer beside the sink, pulled out my travel folder, passports, documents, emergency cash, and left the carrots unpeeled on the counter. That night, I was gone. Not forever. Not in the cruel way some might imagine. I didn't abandon him. I let him find his own footing, the way I once had to when life knocked me down harder than he ever knew. But I needed air. I needed quiet. And I needed to remember who I was before they tried to turn me into a vault with a pulse. I booked a one-way ticket to a place I hadn't spoken of in years, a place even my children had forgotten I once loved. And as the plane lifted off the tarmac, I looked down at the city where my life had unraveled in a single sentence. $300,000. I had given him everything else. But that was where my love drew the line. And somewhere above the clouds, I finally let the first tear fall. He would call. They both would. But not right away. And when they did, well, that's a story for another day. The first few days felt like floating in a dream stitched together by silence and salt air. I landed on the coast of southern Portugal, in a sleepy fishing village I had once visited in my 20s, with a man I almost married before life swept us in different directions. I didn't come here for nostalgia. I came because no one knew me. No one expected me to be a mother, a wife, a fixer of other people's disasters. Here, I was just Maria, an older woman with tired eyes and a suitcase that creaked when it rolled. I rented a modest room above a bakery. Each morning, the scent of fresh bread rose through the floorboards and wrapped itself around me like a shawl. The woman who owned it, Marta, didn't ask questions. She just brought me coffee and a warm roll and told me about her aching knees and lazy cat, and I listened, gratefully. In those first weeks, I walked. I watched old men play cards in the square. I swam in the cold Atlantic with children who thought I was fearless because I never flinched at the waves. I wrote long letters I never sent, letters to my son, to Anna, to myself. I didn't need to send them. I just needed to write. But at night, the quiet became too loud. I'd lie in bed staring at the low ceiling and hear my son's voice over and over, that flat, demanding tone. Pay her debt. Not a plea, not a cry for help, a verdict, a sentence. How did we get here? He used to be so soft-hearted, sensitive even. He cried when he lost his toy train at age 5. He held my hand for too long at school drop-offs. He used to write me birthday cards with hand-drawn hearts and badly spelled poems. And Anna, well, I had my doubts from the start. Too smooth, too sweet, too perfect when she needed to be. I told myself I was being unfair, jealous, possessive, the way mothers can be when their sons build new lives without them. So I softened. I welcomed her. I defended her when my sister whispered, "She's a climber, Maria. Watch your purse." Now I wondered if my sister had seen what I refused to, but regret is a hungry thing. It eats, and it's never satisfied. So I pushed it aside and tried to build new routines. I took up watercolor. I helped Marta at the bakery. I even started teaching English to a few local kids whose parents hoped for something bigger beyond the village. And still, the phone didn't ring. I thought it would, honestly. I expected anger, blame, panic. Instead, silence. Had they moved on? Had they told themselves a story where I was the villain, cold and cruel, turning my back in their time of need? One night, unable to sleep, I wandered down to the sea wall. The tide was out, and the moonlight made everything look silvered and soft. And that's when I heard the voice. "Maria?" Not the voice I expected. A man, maybe in his 60s. Wiry, sunburned, with eyes like bruised almonds. He stepped closer and peered at me like he couldn't quite believe it. "Is it really you?" I blinked. My heart lurched. Because this was not part of the plan. And this man? He was supposed to be long gone. "Luca," I breathed. His name came out like a ghost's sigh, soft, startled, edged with memory. He smiled, lopsided and uncertain, and I saw time roll backward in his eyes. "You remember me," he said. Of course I did. I remembered everything. We were young and stupid and in love in a way that made no sense to anyone but ourselves. I met him on a rainy night in 1978 when my train broke down in Lisbon and he offered me shelter under his umbrella. A musician then, all wild curls and broken Portuguese, he played on corners and in cafes, never quite chasing fame, but never standing still either. We were together for 7 months, the happiest months of my life, though we never said the word forever. He had his path, I had mine. I flew home. He wrote once. I replied. And then life happened, as it does. I married. He drifted. We vanished from each other like chalk in the rain. And yet here he was, standing barefoot by the seawall, holding a bottle of cheap wine and looking at me as if the years between us had just folded shut. "What are you doing here?" I asked, barely more than a whisper. "I live here now," he said. "Well, off and on. Come sit with me?" I hesitated only a moment before nodding. We sat on the stone ledge, the wind salty and cool, and passed the bottle between us like teenagers. I told him the sanitized version, that I needed space, that I'd come for the peace and the sea. He didn't press. He just listened. At some point, he pulled a small harmonica from his jacket and played something soft and aching. I didn't know the song, but I knew the feeling of longing, of not quite belonging. When he finished, we sat quiet for a long time. The stars came out. A dog barked somewhere down the lane. "You were always running," I said. "Even then." He smiled, sad and honest. "And you were always building. You needed roots. I had none." We walked back to the village slowly, like neither of us wanted to break the spell. Before parting, he touched my hand. "I'm glad you're here," he said. So was I, more than I expected. Over the next few weeks, Luca became a gentle shadow in my days. He brought me oranges from the market. He left silly notes folded like boats on my doorstep. He never asked too much, never expected. And yet, just when I was starting to feel steady again, the silence broke. It was a message. From Anna. Not a call. She wouldn't risk hearing my voice. No, it was a long, cold email, sent at 2:12 a.m. I read it 3 times before setting the phone down. She had found me. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize. Instead, she laid it all out like a case file. "You've abandoned your family," she wrote. "Your absence has created chaos. Your son is devastated, and I am left to pick up the pieces." Then came the line that chilled me. "If you don't come back and make this right, I will tell your son what you've hidden, about your past, about Luca." My breath left me. She knew, or thought she did. But how? The memories I had buried, the truths I had never told, I thought they were safe, wrapped in dust and time. But Anna had found something, and she was ready to use it. The next morning, I stood by the window, phone in hand, heart in throat. The email was still open. Her words, sharp and calculated, sat heavy in my chest. I kept rereading the part about Luca. "What you've hidden." I hadn't thought about that summer in years. Not in any real way. Not the parts I had boxed up and sealed, far from the version of myself I let my family see. My life before marriage, before children, before I buried so much under duty and silence. But Anna? How did she know? Had she gone through my things? Had she found the old letters I thought I'd burned? Or had Luca's name slipped out in some careless moment, mentioned by me or a relative? It didn't matter how. What mattered was that she had it, and she was willing to use it, willing to rip open the past and dangle it like bait to bring me home. And it wasn't even about truth. It was about leverage. That afternoon, I sat on the beach with my feet in the surf, feeling the pull of the tide against my skin. Luca joined me not long after, silent for a while, sensing something was wrong. "I got a message," I finally said. He didn't ask from whom. He just nodded, patient. "She says she'll tell my son about us," I added. "About what happened back then." Luca turned his head slowly, the lines around his eyes deepening. "He doesn't know?" "Not all of it. Not about you. Not about the other thing." He looked out at the water. "It was a long time ago, Maria." Not for her, apparently. I felt sick. Not because I was ashamed of what had happened, but because I never got the chance to tell my son in my own way, in my own time. Now Anna held that truth like a weapon, and I wondered, what else did she know? That night, I went back through my things. I hadn't brought much with me, just the essentials, a few keepsakes. But tucked in the lining of my travel pouch was the one thing I never meant to bring, a folded photograph, yellowing at the edges, of me and Luca in 1979 standing outside a hostel in Porto, my arm draped over his shoulder, my belly just beginning to show. He was grinning like a fool. I was wearing a scarf that later got stolen from the clothesline. I had lost that baby 3 weeks later. A son, my first. I never told Luca until years after. By then, it didn't matter. We were different people, in different lives. But it mattered now, because that grief had shaped the mother I later became, the one who clung too tightly, who tried too hard, who gave too much. And maybe my son felt that weight his whole life without understanding where it came from. How could he? I never told him. And now Anna had found some whisper of it. Maybe an old letter or a note from my sister. Maybe Luca had written something long ago that was never truly lost. However she had gotten it, it didn't belong to her. But she would use it all the same. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called my sister, Agnes. First time in months. "Maria," she answered, groggy. "It's the middle of the night." "I need to ask you something," I said. "Did you ever talk to Anna about Luca? About before?" There was a pause. Then, "No, but she came to me a few weeks ago. Said she was doing a family history thing for the kids. Said she wanted to get it right. I didn't tell her anything real. Just that you used to travel a lot before you settled down." I closed my eyes. Anna had played her, played us all. I thanked Agnes and hung up. Then I poured myself a coffee, went downstairs and told Marta I'd be away for a few days. I needed to see Luca. I needed to know what he remembered, and if, somehow, Anna had found her way into those memories too. I found him on the cliff path, that narrow stretch of wild scrub and stone where the sea crashed endlessly below. He was sketching something, a boat maybe, or the curve of the coastline. His back was to me, his shirt flapping in the wind. "Luca," I said louder than I meant to. He turned, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Maria." I walked up, sat beside him, the wind tearing at my scarf. "She's threatening to tell him everything," I said. He didn't need to ask who. "And by everything, you mean?" He started gently. "You, the baby, the loss, all of it." He nodded once. "Do you want him to know?" I stared at the horizon, the line where sky met sea. "I don't know. I never have. He always believed he was my firstborn. I let him believe it. It was easier than trying to explain why I never spoke of the one before." Luca's voice was soft, steady. "Maybe it's time." A sharp sound escaped me, something between a laugh and a sob. "Time? It's decades late, and coming from the woman who married him, not from me." "She's using it to punish you," he said. "But it's not a punishment. It's your story." I looked at him, the way his eyes had stayed so kind. How strange that the only man who had broken my heart gently was the one I trusted now with the broken pieces. "I want to tell him," I said. "But not like this. Not through her filter. Not with bitterness wrapped around it." "Then don't wait." Back in my room, I opened my laptop and began to write. "Dear Alex, there is something I've never told you, and now I'm afraid someone else might try to tell it first, without the care or truth it deserves." I wrote slowly, carefully, pouring out the story I had buried for 45 years. About a summer when I was young and wild and in love. About a child who never drew breath but changed everything inside me. About grief that had no place to go, so it turned into silence. And how, when I held him, my second son, my only son to live, I held him as if I could rewrite the ending of the first. I explained why I never told him, that it wasn't shame, it was fear, that the depth of love I felt for him was born not in place of the first child, but because of him. I didn't justify. I didn't beg. I simply told him the truth. And at the bottom I added, "I'm still your mother. I've always been your mother. But I am also a woman who lived other lives before you. Please don't let Anna take that from me. Or from you." Then I sent it. I cried after. Not because I was scared, but because I finally felt clean. 3 days passed. No reply. On the 4th, a knock at my door. Marta answered. I heard voices, then footsteps. And then, there he was. Alex, standing in my doorway. His face unreadable. His eyes, older than I remembered. "Hi, Mom," he said. My voice caught. "Hi." He stepped in, closed the door. We stood there, silent. Then finally he spoke. "I didn't know," he said, "about any of it, about Luca, about the baby." I nodded, lips pressed tight. "And I don't know how to feel yet," he said. "But I know one thing." He looked at me, and something in his expression cracked open. "I should have never asked you to clean up our mess. I see that now." My legs gave a little, and I sat. He came and sat, too. "I was angry," he said. "Scared. I thought you were my safety net. I didn't think of you as a person, a woman with her own past." I reached for his hand. He let me. "I should have told you long ago," I said, "but I was too busy being what you needed." "And Anna?" I asked after a long pause. His mouth tightened. "We're talking. But after what she tried to do to you, I see her differently." I nodded. Then he pulled something from his pocket, The photo. The one of me and Luca. "She found this in Dad's things," he said, "in a box in the attic." I blinked. "Your father?" He nodded. "He knew, didn't he?" I laughed then, soft and full of memory. He always knew, and he loved me anyway. We sat in the quiet, just mother and son. No demands, no debts, only truth, finally. That night I made tea the old way, leaves, not bags, and set the mugs down on the tiny wooden table. Alex sat across from me, hands clasped, looking like a boy again, in a way that caught me off guard. Not because he looked young, but because I suddenly saw the pieces of him I had forgotten. The earnestness, the way his brow furrowed when he was thinking hard. "So," he said carefully, "Luca." I smiled into my tea. "Yes, Luca. Do you love him?" I looked out the window. The moonlight was sifting gently across the floor, like flour through a sieve. I did. Once, deeply, and now, I don't know what it is now. Something tender, something grateful. It's not about romance. It's about history. About surviving time and still being able to look at someone and say, "You mattered." Alex nodded slowly. "I'd like to meet him." That surprised me. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because he was part of your story, and if I'm going to understand you, I need to understand the whole story." We didn't talk about Anna much that night. Not because there wasn't more to say, but because some wounds don't need prodding right away. He told me they were taking time apart. He didn't ask for my opinion, and I didn't offer it. Instead, we stayed up until the candles burned low, talking about little things, childhood memories, soup recipes, the day he chipped his tooth skateboarding and made me swear not to tell his father. For the first time in years, I felt like he wasn't just my son. He was a man I might have liked even if he hadn't come from my body. The next morning, Luca joined us for breakfast. Marta insisted on baking fresh bread, and the smell filled every inch of the room. Luca brought honeycomb and a bottle of strong coffee. Alex was quiet at first, but not cold. Watching, listening, measuring something in Luca's voice, maybe his sincerity, maybe his role in the great untold shape of our family. "Were you going to raise the baby together?" Alex asked, unflinching. Luca glanced at me before answering. "Yes," he said. "We were young, but we meant it." "And when he died?" Luca took a breath. "We grieved separately. It broke something in both of us, but we carried it differently. She built a family. I stayed away." Alex looked at me. "And you never told Dad?" "I told him everything," I said. "On our second date." That made him laugh. "Of course you did." And then, "I wish you'd told me about all of it." "I know," I said, "but some stories are made of glass. You touch them too early, they shatter." He didn't argue, just nodded. Then he stood, reached across the table and hugged me. One of those tight, wordless hugs that says, "We've been through something." After he left, back to Lisbon for a few days, to think, he said, I sat with Luca on the beach. He skipped stones. I just let the wind comb through my hair. "Do you think he'll forgive her?" I asked. "Eventually," Luca said. "People forgive strange things when love's involved." "And us?" I asked quietly. He smiled, that same crooked grin from the photo. "We already did, Maria. Long ago." I leaned my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. The waves rolled in. The wind softened, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe like I belonged to the world again. 2 weeks passed in quiet rhythm. Coffee at sunrise, walks with Luca along the cliff path, the sea always breathing nearby. Alex messaged now and then, just enough to say, "I'm still here." Then one morning Marta appeared at my door, flustered. "There's a woman downstairs asking for you. Said she's family." I knew before I saw her. Anna. She was dressed too carefully, as always. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke for a long moment. "I didn't come to fight," she said. I didn't invite her in, but I listened. She told me Alex had left her, that he'd said things she hadn't expected, about trust, control, love turned sideways. She said she regretted using the truth as a weapon. "I thought I could fix it," she whispered, "but I made it worse." I looked at her, this woman who had hurt me so deeply, and I felt no rage, just a quiet sadness. "You didn't break me, Anna," I said, "but you did lose me." She nodded, tears threatening. "I know." And then she left. The next morning, I flew home. No one met me at the airport. I didn't need anyone to. My home was still my home, a little dusty, a little quiet, but intact. Waiting. On my table, a note from Alex. "I know now that you were never just my mother. You were a whole woman before I ever arrived, and I'm sorry for forgetting that. You drew the line I couldn't. Thank you." I cried reading it, but this time the tears were soft. Healing. Later that week, Alex came by. He brought pastries. We sat by the window. "I want to know who you were," he said, "before us, all of it." So I began. Not just the stories that fit neatly into motherhood, but the ones with sharp edges, the ones that made me me. And he listened, not as a child, but as a man finally seeing the woman behind the name Mom.